Rastafari is the Lord and the Savior. I've done the covenant keeper. God is the Alpha and the Omega. The Alpha and the Omega.
I'm going to take my time and get smoke a little, gather myself. I'm having to just came in. The house is going to be a little busy here. So expect a little chaos in the background tonight, but aside from that, we'll be able to check in. Say people are starting to come in. Welcome everybody. Tony Belani. What's up? Yeah, a little early. Like I said, if you missed it earlier, I had a really hectic day and a little scattered, so I wanted to just get on and keep the tunes going for a second, smoke a bowl, and gather myself. I've had a busy day with the Compost biz and getting used to our new schedule and whatnot. So yeah, we've had our first batch of booch was a success, and now we're starting our second batch and waiting for our licensing inspection. And once that happens, we open the floodgates and it's on. We start slinging kegs of booch and hitting the farmers markets, and my life is going to get even busier. So yeah, so a little frazzled today, but things are going great in the garden. I have done a few things in there that I'm going to let you guys. We're going to talk about it today a little bit. Where the growth is phenomenal. I added a new layer of Malibu compost and another layer of mulch. I got to give a shout out to Michael Jung. I don't know if he's out here yet, if he's coming out tonight, but we've had some really great conversations in my comment section of my videos. The guy is really, really knowledgeable and passionate, and has really opened my eyes to the humus layer, not to be confused with hummus, the humus layer, and its importance. And he actually pointed out in my latest video that I was lacking a humus layer, of any significance. And I stepped back from his comments and I looked and I assessed, and he's absolutely right. My humus layer is non-existent. It was minuscule at best. And so, he really, what he said really rang true, and kind of it struck a chord with me. And I really wanted to kind of go on this humus journey with you guys. Some of y'all probably know all good and well about it, about the importance of it. I thought I did, and I feel like I've got a newfound appreciation with some of the research I've done. And so I think today, we're going to talk just briefly about the flowering period duties and some of the things that I think the beginner should look out for. And then we're going to dive into the humus discussion and a little more into the food soil web as my basic understanding of it. And, it's kind of a topic that maybe should have been talked about when we were talking about the exudates and whatnot, but better late than never. So shout out to Michael Jung. Man, brother, I really appreciate your comments and your input, and I look forward to the continued dialogue. So really glad to see people pouring in. Thanks a lot for coming out. I appreciate it. I appreciate the encouragement you folks have been giving me. I'm not exactly a really kind of this isn't my gig, my type of thing. So people's encouragement keeps me coming back, and I know that there's this open source of information happening, and I really want to kind of continue that. So let's see. I wanted to real quick touch on the Living Soil Symposium that's happening in Medford at the end of the month, 25th and 26th. There's a lot of good speakers, 2 full days of speakers. So I'm going to be going there, and I'm hoping to see some of you from IG out there and linking up and finally getting to shake hands with some of you folks. If not, I'll be coming back with a ton of information. I'm going to take lots of notes and grow my brain and come back and hopefully share some more information from the from what I learned at the symposium. So I don't have Lacey here with me right now. She's going to be back in just a bit. She went to pick up one of the kids from Taekwondo. And so, like I said, we're going to hear there's going to be some chaos going on back here, but it's, family life, right? So I'm waiting for Lacey to come back, and she'll be able to kind of field the questions as they come in. And until then, make sure you tag my name at Joshua Steensland, so it's highlighted and I can see it out of my peripheral, and maybe I can get to your questions when she's not here. So anyway, I want to keep this short and sweet like I usually do. We all have lives to live, and so 30, 40 minutes at tops, so let's just dive right into it. Anyway, get sidetracked by the comments. So anyhow, flowering period duties. I want to, because I kind of want to do this continuous information flow from beginning to end, so to speak, on how I handle things in my process. So, maybe some of you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you can, glean whatever from this information that you deem necessary. But what I would do for the beginner, and let's just kind of go right here from square one, is for your flowering room, you got to make sure that it's light tight. And when I say light tight, I mean light tight, not a pinhole in your panda, not nothing. And the only way you're really going to know that is with a sensitive scientific instrument, or you're just going to have to sit down in your dark room and let your eyes adjust. And that takes a while. It might take 10 minutes before your eyes are completely adjusted and your rods and cones are all used to the dark. And that's when all of a sudden you'll see a little fucking glow right over in the corner of the room, because you got a little pinhole dot in your panda plastic where you didn't double up or whatever, right? So that's the one thing. You got to have to put the time in to make sure that it's light tight, or constructed in such a fashion where it's light tight. And even then, I would sit in there and make sure, because you just never know. You'd be surprised at how small a hole or a gap will illuminate and glow and really fuck your shit up. So sit in there, make sure you're light tight. And there's other things that will cause Hermes and cause your plants to geek out, like the weird greenish kind of light that'll be on your mini split air handler, or the red light on your heater that indicates that it's on. I can't tell you how many grows I go into, and red lights are there, and green lights are going on, and there are some green lights that are good, but they've got to be green glass, and it's got to be thick. You don't want any white light bleeding out. So if it's a white party light, a white bulb painted green, like a party light that you can find, if there's any scratches in there, white light's going to bleed through, and you might not even be able to tell. And you got that green light going on and off, on and off. I don't even use green lights. I just don't do it. So I tape up anything that illuminates, anything at all. And even if it's green, I don't give a shit. I don't want any light. So I just err on the side of caution when it comes to that. And in my crazy mind, I've really felt like I've seen reduced or weird growth patterns around environmental control sensors and whatnot. So I just prefer to have it pitch black in there and dark. So that's one of the first things that I'd like to touch on for flower period duties, is making sure that your night cycle is indeed going to be a night cycle, and that'll save you a lot of hassles and headaches with hermaphrodites and fluffy buds and weird spots in your room where you just don't understand why you're getting weird growth in that spot time and time again. And once again, you'd be chasing your tail like a dog and never even realize what's going on when you needed to just sit in your room with it dark, and iron out those light leaks. So in my room, I tend to let the plants just kind of grow in veg, and I don't do much like lollipopping at that point. So I consider that my flower period duties. And right before I switch to flower, if I'm going to take any cuttings, I take them at that point, from the top, and then I'll lollipop, right? And so that's how I handle that that part is I just lollipop pretty much one time at the beginning of my bloom cycle, and then over the 8 to 10 weeks it's going to take to flower. I don't do much else down there, and I haven't seemed to need to. The canopy keeps the light, the diffused light, to such a point where we don't get much growth below the canopy anyway. So aside from those things, as far as my flowering period goes, that's when I really make sure that I've got my dehumidifier going during the night cycle to keep those vapor pressure levels appropriate, and we don't get our plants don't get waterlogged and socked down with moisture all night long. So once again, I try to follow the vapor pressure deficit at night too. I mean, I know that their photosynthesis is involved, but we're also dealing with pressure, water pressure on the plant. And so if you've got too much pressure pressing down on the plant, it's not gonna release any of that water that it's holding. It's just gonna sit on it all night, and it might even weep it out. And so you could end up getting moisture on the buds when you never even fully did any kind of spraying. So if you got to keep your humidity, at a decent level at the night cycle to avoid any kind of moisture happening in your canopy, some that you might not even be able to catch because it'll just go right down into your bud. And if that's happening night after night after night, I don't have to tell you what's going to happen. Not good things. So that's the other biggie, is making sure that your humidity in the night cycle is manageable and is at such a level that your plant's health isn't going to suffer, and you're not going to might skate by for a year, maybe even 2. Next thing you know, one of these times it's going to bite you. So just try to be on it as much as you can. Let me scan through, see if we got any questions. What do you think about the idea of cocoa-based no-till mix? I found almost nothing about it and kind of feel I'm in this journey alone. I'll be honest with you, I haven't heard a whole lot about cocoa in no-till and goods or bads, but it's definitely worth looking into. It seems like the worms would really like it and the microlife would like it. I don't know if it's got any kind of weird pH stability issues that might be the case, or it might break down too quick. Man, I couldn't tell you. That's a really good question, and maybe somebody in chat has the answer for that. So hit them up, guys. Let's see. Okay, looks like we're all good with flowering. I don't do any kind of top dressing or any kind, as you know how I roll. There's just fresh water happening, and then I just make sure to keep the canopy relatively thinned. I don't have any kind of method or time schedule or whatever. I'll just kind of stroll through the garden and thin out the big fan leaves, where I think that they could be creating little pockets or microclimates and whatnot. And even then, I just really don't stress about it too much. I like to make sure I've got good airflow. And as the buds mature and develop, making sure that airflow stays on point is clearly important. Seven Finger Ox, hey, what's up, brother? Good to see you out here. That's one of my local guys. Really good dude. Do you have rice hulls in your soil? I don't believe the Keep It Simple had rice hulls to begin with. I believe their aeration was pumice. I'm not opposed to amending it at some point, but I use so much barley straw and whatnot, and I know barley straw isn't a aerator, but I feel like it creates a nice aerated layer there where the worms can do their thing. But anyway, so now rice hulls is a great thing. They degrade really fast, and you have to re-amend with them, or it can't be your only source of aeration. So back to the flowering duties. That's pretty much all I got going on, and it is just basically watching the ladies do their thing. At that point, there's not much else you do in my system that would help. Maybe a compost tea or something, but we're really pushing the minimalist thing. So that's how that's going. Let's see. DC Pharma says thumbs up on the rice hulls. Right on, bro. Nice to see you out here. Virginia Living Organics. Joshua, do you have any whitefly issues with the soil? No, and if I ever do this, if I ever like, I got bags of Malibu compost from the hydro shop, and no doubt I brought fungus gnats home, and I'm assuming that's what you mean is the fungus gnats. The soil life, the Stratios, or what they used to be called hypothesis mites in the soil, are such a huge population of them that they just would annihilate them. Occasionally I'll see them, but then they go away. So like they'll introduce themselves into the system, but my soil is so healthy that it just chews them up, and they don't last. They can't get a foothold because my beneficials are so predominant that they don't stand a chance. So you could literally introduce fungus gnats into my system, and that's it. How do I feel about lactobacillus? I know nothing about it. I know nothing about KNF. So I can't even speak to it. I know that there's quite a few people that I respect and know their stuff, that know plenty about it. It's not something I'm opposed to learning about, but right now it's just kind of not on my radar. It will be, though. I could see in the future, maybe in the next year or so, diving into that. But let's see. Yeah, DC Farm, it is a dog-eat-dog world in the soil, and you got to have the big dogs, or at least enough of the little dogs to take care of them. And that's a good segue kind of into why I wanted to talk about the humus layer and the importance of it. And Michael Jung really opened my eyes to the importance of it, and that my beds were lacking it greatly, and that they still are, but I need to work on it incrementally, so I don't bog down the system with the 6-inch layer of compost and straw. I'm going to do incremental compost additions to build this humus layer up, and I think that's part of the problem. It is part of the problem with commercial agriculture around the world, is that our farming practices over the years have stripped the humus layer from the soil, and now we're dependent on chemical fertilizers or all these other crazy extreme methods just to grow a simple crop. And you've got people like Elaine Ingham, I think I said her first name right, but she's just the food soil web guru. Watched a few of her seminars or 1-hour presentations on the food soil web, and it was really, really such an eye-opener. You think you know, and then you hear someone like that talk who's able to present it in such simple terms that it's I don't know, it just hits you, and you're like, duh, like, no doubt that's the case. So the humus layer is going to assist in that food soil web process, and for those of you that aren't familiar with it or hear that being thrown around a lot, it's not just a buzz phrase, it's actually what's happening. So you've got the bacteria that are present in the soil. They're kind of they're your building blocks, and they create a lot of the glue in the soil. So if you got a soil that's very compacted and you introduce bacteria to it, the bacteria will start to consume the things in the soil that it consumes, and then releases polysaccharides or glues. They really like a glue, and creates micro aggregates, which is little clumps of the dirt, right? And in doing so, this attracts, when you get fungal activity as well, those grab those micro aggregates, the fungus, and creates macro aggregates. And what happens is you've got, when it pulls all these pieces of the soil together, it's created air pockets, rooms for roots to grow, and then what these bacteria and fungi literally build themselves around the root zones of the plants that are in there. Now, if that's all you had was bacteria and fungi in your soil, your plants would never eat because they'd be locked up in the bacteria and fungus, right? So you'd only have things like cheat grass, weeds that don't rely on mycorrhiza to thrive and to get their food source. So they live on really specific types of nitrogen and whatnot. So when you've got the bacteria and the fungi that are now have all nutrients locked up into their bodies, and you need your higher order like nematodes and whatnot that will consume the bacteria and the fungus. Like, I want to really stress here that, again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a food soil web expert. I'm just sharing the knowledge that I'm learning as I go and at my basic level. So I know some of you might have a greater understanding, but this is kind of my basic gist, and I'm hoping that it's news to some of y'all. So the nematodes will, and the other higher order creatures that feed on the bacteria and the fungi, create amino acids and make those nutrients available to the plant. So the plant needs the higher order, needs this food soil web to deliver the nutrients through the root zone. And so that's where we can go back to the root exudes and having a diverse cover crop and having a rich, healthy, thick humus layer, there we go, humus layer that will send out the multitude of the exudates that it needs. So you have a diverse population of bacteria and a diverse population of fungi that can process the nutrients and minerals in your soil effectively for the plants. And so having a system that's going to sustain all of those forms of life, requires a thick humus layer. And so, we talk about what is humus, and it's basically compost that's had all the organic material used up out of it, right? So you're left with basically carbon, I believe this is my understanding of it, and that it'll last for 1,000 years. It holds 90% its weight in water, and it provides nooks and crannies for the bacteria and the fungi to live and thrive in a highly oxygenated aerobic environment. So that's the key word in this whole thing is aerobic. These all need oxygen. The bacteria and the fungi that we want need oxygen to live and oxygen to thrive. And if you start to lack oxygen and the CO2 builds up in the soil from all the processes happening, it's not going to be a good thing for your plant. So having a loose, aerated, a soil with good tillith is what they're called. When you got all those micro and macro, aggregates and little clumps that takes a long time. You get one rain on a dry, dusty, tilled soil, and it'll flatten out and turn to a crust, right? So we've really got to work on building this humus layer and recognizing its importance. And it's been a huge epiphany thanks to Mr. Jung as of late for me. And I'm really going to work on building that humus layer in my beds, so I'm certain that I've got everything that my plants need and that the whole system is intact. Would you consider good vermicompost and vermicastings to be good humus? As far as I understand, yes, that it would be a good component. Now, if it's your only source, I couldn't tell you. I don't see why not, because that's part of the process. The worms creating their own micro aggregates, from just consuming the material and shitting it out, right? So I think it would be fine, but in my mind, I would want a more rich compost, a good organic, well-made compost at home that's going to have a real rich diversity of your fungal life and the bacterial stuff going on, because you really want to just kind of think of it as an inoculation. At least that's my basic understanding of it. One Swift guy, so I've been watering my no-till with water from my fish pond. Do you know any concerns that would arise from doing this? I've never done it, but my concern would maybe possibly be nitrate levels or ammonia levels. Depends on what's happening with your fish waste in the water and how it's breaking down. I couldn't tell you. It's definitely aquaponics is not quite my thing. I'm really, really interested in it. Just don't know enough about it. I would be cautious. Okay. So revolution now to turn me on. Is there any different mixes that we use for veg or flower stages? Okay, EC Canna is asking a really good question about different mixes for no-till. He hasn't done no-till before, and he's also asking about if you use a different mix for veg or flower, and that's you don't at all. And that's kind of the beauty of no-till and regenerative farming practices in general, is that everything for veg and flower that the plant needs is in the soil already. And when you have a complete food soil web, kind of like we were just talking about, your plant will utilize its own natural processes to send out the carbohydrates and the sugars. Mrs. Ingham calls them cakes and cookies, right? Because it's like protein, carbohydrate, and starch or something, right? And it's basically the same mix that you make cakes and cookies with. Really great analogy. I highly, highly recommend checking out her like seminars on YouTube and whatnot. Very, very informative. So you don't need a different mix for veg and flower. The plant will send out the call, so to speak, to get the nutrients that it needs for whatever cycle, whatever part of this life cycle it's in at the time. Big Ed's asking about bokashi. I don't use bokashi. I've never used it. So that might be one for somebody in the chat, because I'm really once again, I think that's just like a fermented compost juice from what I understand. I'm gonna plead some ignorance on that. I'm a little limited in my knowledge on bokashi. So okay, so cool with the question. So that's I want to keep this short and sweet tonight. I really wanted to encourage you guys to dive into the humus layer with me, and I'm going to do some new videos kind of showing you. I've already seen benefits from adding the Malibu compost and the extra straw layer. I wasn't seeing my worms a lot. I would scratch the surface and they'd be very deep. And it makes perfect sense now that they were staying away from the surface. I didn't have enough there to buffer it. So now I could pull the new straw, and there's a good couple inches from the old straw, the compost, and the old cover crop that's just kind of going to be left to decay. I'm seeing worms up into that. They're getting busy, and so every time I pull back, I'm seeing lots of worms and lots of activity. So I'm already seeing a benefit from adding the compost. I thought I was starting to see a little tick burn on one of the plants, so I'm going to keep my eye out for that. There's really not much I can do about it now. It's already in the system. So if anybody knows if Malibu compost has been known to be hot or burned, leave me a comment or hit me up with a message. I'd like to hear your experience with it. This is my kind of first time using it, and we'll see. So, right, how long have we been going here? So anyway, I'm trying to think if I missed anything about the humus that's important. So really, it's just basically compost, whether it's vermicompost or yard compost. You want it to be aerobic compost, healthy compost. If it's black or stinks like sewage, it's not something you want to put in your beds. And if you have to source it, go source it. There's no shame in that. You really want to make sure that your beds have everything that they need. And a properly cultivated, rich, thick humus layer will do that. It'll reduce your amount of water that you have to have. It'll reduce the stress on the microlife in your soil. And it's just nothing but good. So I highly encourage you no-tillers that are watching to, check your humus layer, make sure you could probably add more to it. Okay, Nate Doe says he's used Malibu compost and never had any burns. So that's good to hear. Chronic Cool Grows asks, so you don't make your own compost? I have a compost pile, but where we live, we got caked in snow, so it got buried in snow. I don't have a bin type compost system, so I'm gonna have to be honest and say no. I don't have my own compost pile as of yet. So Malibu it is. Tattooing trees. What is the best way to introduce the nematodes and other microbes into a first-time bed? That's a great question too. When I first got my beds my soil from Keep It Simple, I inoculated with like OG BioWar. I did some compost teas. Then I also went out, I bought from Evergreen Grower Supply, I bought 50,000 hypopsis mites. And if you look back into my Granddaddy Purple videos, I had a really bad fungus gnat problem, and that's what prompted me to do that. It was my first cycle. Yeah, and I mean, it was terrible. And so I bought like 50 or 75,000 mites, and they just wiped them out in 5 days. And I've never had a problem since. They've managed to maintain a population in my beds, and they're really doing good. I've also added rove beetles, and then 2 other forms of predator mites that were canopy dwelling, and they might have made their way down there. And they live for a little bit, but I'm not quite sure where we're at with those. But when you look in my soil, it's nothing but those hypopsis mites. I mean, it's insane. You put your hand in there, you'll have 100 on your hand in 15 seconds. So fungus gnats don't stand a chance. And once you introduce those things into your system, and they'll find their way in. Like, I didn't introduce roly-polies, they just showed up, so you provide a habitat and they'll just arrive, right? Oh yeah, the nematodes. You can get those. They're usually like in sponges, or like locked in solution, or into like a powder or something, and you can spray them into your soil with a fine mist sprayer. You want it to be very fine, or else you'll just kind of glob them all into one location, and it'll take time for them to work their way. If you got a fine atomized mist, I think there's a certain level. You can't use too much pressure or you'll kill them. So do your research before you apply your nematodes. But you definitely want to do an application of those proactively before you have any issues with those other things. Plus, you want them available to consume the bacteria and create that food soil web. Can you maybe do some vids on some tea brews? Yeah, I could do a couple tea brew vids. I mean, I only do 1 or 2. I do a earthworm compost tea, and I also do like the kelp as a foliar, and so I can definitely do a tea video. I think that's a really good idea. I really haven't done how-to videos, so I'm not quite sure how I'll tackle that. That's the whole reason I'm doing this. The way I shoot videos for my room updates is just on my phone. It's on the fly. I don't edit it clearly, and I just say whatever jackass thing comes to my mind, pronouncing things wrong. And so, and I don't go back and edit it or nothing. So, how-to videos have been kind of I'm trying to wrap my head around how to do that without diving into the whole video editing thing, and I'm just not sure I have the time or energy for that. So we'll figure that out. Okay. So I think if that's, I think we're getting to the end, probably. Unless anybody has any questions, I think we're going to wrap it up for this week. And once again, like I said, just check out Ingem. She's got a kind of a pricey soil certification course. It's $2,000, but I mean, I think it's well worth it, and I plan on taking it sometime in the next 12 months. It's a really detailed course, and I think it'll demystify a lot of the things that I'm still maybe unclear about what's happening in the soil. So yeah, looks like everybody's ready to rock, and I really appreciate you guys coming out, and hope this wasn't too basic for some of y'all. And by all means, leave me messages or comments, and see you out there.